Position 3, he yelled. The arms came up to the maximum elevation, the 100 of them moving as one. Shields down, he muttered to Horace and heard him repeat the order. Draw. Beneath his breath, he told himself. Count to 3 as each arm brings back its arrow to the full draw. Then a loud shoot, and instantly he screamed, shields up, shields up. As Horace took up the cry, the shields swung back into position to conceal the archers from return fire, and hopefully from observation. Again the wait, then the volley of arrows slammed down into the Timijai Ulan, just as they were on the point of firing into the gap their comrades had forced in the shield wall. Once more, men and horses went down and screaming, tangled heaps, grouped together as they were, and not moving. The Ulan made a perfect target for the massed arrows. At least 20 of them were down, including their commander. Oh, I just expectorated. But you didn't see that, so it's fine. Now their sergeants were yelling as the survivors to get moving, to get out of this killing ground. Mr. H never saw the volley that struck his men, but he did see, in his peripheral vision, the concentrated movement of the 100 shields as they spun back and forth like so many gates opening and closing. A few seconds later, he saw one of his foremost Ulans collapse and disintegrate. And then the shields moved again, and he saw the archers, at least 100 of them, he estimated, working smoothly and in unison as they launched another volley at the retreating Ulan, which had attacked this Canadian line. The shields swung up to cover the archers as more Timijai riders went down. Again, the shields swung down in unison, and this time he saw the soft flight of arrows, black against the sky, as they arced up and struck into another of his galloping Ulans. He turned and caught the eye of his third son, a captain on his staff. He pointed with his lance to the line of shields on the slight rise behind the Canadian ranks. There are their archers, he said. Take a Ulan and investigate. I want information. The captain nodded, saluted, and clapped spurs to the barrel-shaped body of his horse. He was shouting commands to the leader of the nearest troop of 60 as he galloped down the front line of the Timijai army. In their raised position behind the Canadian lines, Will and Horace were working smoothly together, pouring volley after volley into the weakening riders. Inevitably now, they were beginning to take casualties as individual Timijai saw them and returned fire. But the shield drill worked smoothly, and their improvised method of exposing the men to return fire for only a few seconds at a time was paying dividends. What was more, the Canadians were beginning to see the effect of the disciplined, concentrated fire on their enemies, as each volley hissed down and as arrows found their marks and Timijai saddles emptied. The waiting axemen roared their approval. For the first time, Will had seen the Kaijin. Sharp shooters attached to each Ulan as they tended to take him and Horace under fire. He had just dueled with 2 of them, and watched in satisfaction as the second slumped sideways out of his saddle. Horace nudged his arm and pointed. Look, he said, and Will, following the line he indicated, saw a Ulan galloping from the Timijai lines and heading straight for them. There was no wheeling and turning for these riders. They were coming straight on a dead run, and it was obvious where they were heading. We've been spotted, he said, then calling to his men, face front, half right, load. Hands reached for arrows, knocked them firmly to strings. Ready? That was Evelyn once more. He grinned as he thought of how Holt had questioned the need of her to be here. Suddenly he was glad the grizzled ranger had lost that argument. He shook the thought aside, estimating the speed of the oncoming riders. Already they were shooting, and arrows were rattling on the shields along the line, but all the advantages lay with Will and his men. Shooting from a stable, unmoving elevated position, and from behind cover, they held the upper hand in any exchange. Position 2, he called. Draw. Shields down, Horace yelled, giving Will just the right pause. Shoot, shouted Will. Shields up, roared Horace, covering his friend as he did so. The archers were exposed to return fire for no more than a few seconds. Even so, under the constant barrage of arrows from their Timijai, they took a few casualties. Then their volley hit the onrushing Ulan and wiped out the front rank of 12, sending men and horses tumbling yet again. The riders in the following ranks tried to avoid their fallen comrades, but in vain. More horses came down, more riders tumbled out of their saddles. Some managed to leap leap their horses over the tangled bodies, and they were the ones who rode clear. As the others tried to reorganize, another volley, 10 seconds behind the first, fell on them. Mr. H's son, with one arrow through his right thigh and another in the soft flesh between neck and shoulder, lay across the body of his horse. He watched as the shields opened and shut, and the arrows poured out in a constant, disciplined stream. He saw the two heads moving at the fortified position at the end of the archer's line. That was what his father needed to know. He watched as another 2 volleys hissed into the sky. Thankfully, they were directed at another Ulan as it galloped past. He could actually hear the commander as the commands as the 2 men in the command position called them. One of the voices sounded absurdly young. It was growing dark early, he reflected, and promptly realized that it could be no later than mid-morning. He craned painfully to look at the sky, but it was a brilliant blue, and with a sudden thrill of fear, he realized he was dying. He was dying with urgent information that he must pass on to his father. This is kind of sad, but I also kind of find it kind of funny. Groaning in pain, he dragged himself to his feet and began to stump back towards the Timurjai lines, picking his way through the tangle of fallen bodies. A riderless horse cantered past him, and he tried to reach it, but was too weak. Then he heard a thunder of hoofs behind him, and a strong hand gripped the back of his sheepskin jacket and hauled him up and over a saddlebow, where he gasped and moaned with the pain in his neck and leg. He angled round to see his saviour. It was a sergeant from one of the other Ulans. "Take me to General Mr. H, urgent message." He managed to croak, and the sergeant, recognizing the staff insignia on his shoulders, nodded and wheeled his horse towards the commander post. 3 minutes later, the mortally wounded captain told his father all that he had seen. 4 minutes later, he was dead. That was really sad. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you for listening to read up to chapter 34. If you'd like to listen to read chapter 35, then please stay posted, and hopefully I'll see you next time for hopefully not such a sad ending. Right, thank you, bye-bye.